So, I actually finished this project quite some time ago. And I was doing 2 other projects at the same time using the same camera and the same video card. And another project using a different video card, which I transferred to the hard drive and then changed the memory cards in the computer and thought, oh, I forgot to delete the old pictures. So I deleted 3 episodes that were partially shot that I had not transferred to my hard drive, and the end of this project was one of them. So I'm going to try and reenact some of this for you. It won't be as complete as the original, but my interest only goes just so far. Joining me a little bit late in this project, what I have here is a single stage dust collector from Harbor Freight, and I'm going to turn it into a 2-stage dust collector because on a standard inspection of the turbines, I found that there were paint chips and dings in the turbines already from things that were larger than dust that got sucked into the system. So I decided if I wanted this to last, I had to change it to a 2-stage. This is the corner where the dust collector was. So my plan is to move the motor and turbine unit and mount it over here. Originally I was going to use 2x4s for the blocks to attach to the brick, but I decided that over time vibration and the dry air, since this is Arizona, would probably dry them out and might split them, so I decided to laminate my own 2x3s basically out of some scrap plywood that I had, and this will be the platform that the motor and the turbine actually works on. So the first order of business is to get the motor and the turbine off of this platform. This is the unit that's going to be the separator to start with. I got it online at Amazon. It's advertised that it goes through, that it'll fit a 30 and a 31 gallon garbage can. So the idea is that the can will sit here on the top, on the platform, and the motor will mount about here so that the two will connect to each other. Point where I can just swing the lid out of the way and take the can and empty it and bring the can back and put the lid back on and be ready to go. So here I'm just using the sander to knock off the sharp corners on all the plywood bits. I intended mounting the motor to the wall with the toggle bolts. So here I'm using a Forstner bit to drill everything out in a back set, and then I just use a 3/8 inch regular bit to drill out the center. I wanted to be real careful about where I laid these holes out so that they landed in the face of a brick and not in the grout lines. Laying out the motor on the backing board was tedious because I wanted to make sure that the motor and the rotor weren't spinning uphill on one side or the other because I'd had it out of level, so I had to make it as level as I could. I don't know why everybody laughs at my shopsmith. I think it comes in handy a lot. I figured T-nuts were perfect for this because lag bolts might have just shaken loose over time from the vibration of the fan. So after all the paint dried, I decided I'd dry fit the backplate to the wall and see how it was going to work. And it was at that point that I realized that once the motor was on this thing, it was going to be way too heavy for me to balance by myself. So I got this temporary support and just screwed it up there and made it level, so that I could just bring the motor over on the back when it's mounted to the back plate and just shove it up in there and screw it off. Worked out really well. Time to mount the blower unit to the motor. I checked all the measurements again to make sure the new holes and the T-nuts were going to hold everything tight. They seemed to do a pretty good job. It tightened down good and tight. Once I was done with the bolts, I tipped it up and gave it a good shake to see if there were any rattles or rolls, and there weren't. It was finally time to put the motor up in place, and I was really glad that I'd put that mounting board in. There was no way I could have held this up by itself. That mounting board worked so well, I decided I was going to leave it, because eventually I was going to take the motor down to do maintenance on it. And rather than re-level it, just leave it. Never did paint it, though. The separator lid only came with one plastic elbow, 4-inch plastic elbow. So I went to the big box store and I got myself just a little chimney piece to use on the inside, and then I was going to use the plastic one on the outside for the intake hose. Unfortunately, the plastic one was originally meant to be used for the inside, so it didn't fit over the cones on the outside. But a little heat and a little persuasion, and there it goes. The hard part about this is remembering it's hot for quite some time. In the meantime, the metal chimney had a problem with its quilting being a little bit too narrow for the inside of the lid on the intake. A little bit of hammer work and it fits nice and snug. Didn't even have to put a screw in it. The original platform that came with the Harbor Freight dust collector was a little bit narrow to hold the garbage can without it falling over. I got a piece of scrap plywood and lined up for the original mount holes from the motor, and even used the original bolts to hold it in place. Something else I never bothered to go back and paint was that wood platform. But it works, it's nice and steady. And now it's time to push it into place and hose her up. It was at this point that I realized the hoses were going to crisscross and it wasn't going to be as nice and clean as I'd hoped. I also realized that with the hoses crisscrossing, I wish I had put the motor up another 6 inches or so, just to give room for this lid. But the lid fits in. And the hoses all connect. But it all comes down to, will it suck or will it suck? Well, it's finished for now. It's not quite as clean as I hoped it would be. I was hoping to be able to, because this only has 3 screws in it, I thought maybe I could take the shell for the rotor and rotate it. But it turns out that the supports that are on this are welded on. And for this project, at this time, I'm really not ready to cut those off and grind and re-weld or screw or whatever it would take to do that. So this hose ended up being more in the way than I had originally planned. I had hoped it would come out to the side here and go straight down. That didn't happen. It is still very easy to empty. I do end up having to remove 1 hose anyway. And since I take the 1 hose and use it everywhere around the shop at this time, in this shop, why, it's good enough. And all I have to do is just lift it out and take the can out to empty it. Now, I guess there's an obligatory test, as I've been watching everybody else's videos, where they take the dust and dump it on the floor and then suck it up to show you that the bag is just as empty as it was before and that all the dust goes back in the can. It does. Like I said, I've been using it for a few weeks, but just because, I'll do it anyway. So here we go. Just to be totally honest, there is about a 1/2 inch of very fine dust in the bottom of this right now. And there it is, chunks and all. Bottle caps, I intentionally have stuff in here that chunks of wood that you wouldn't want going through your turbine. There might be just a little bit more dust in here, but that's fine. That'll take about 2 years to fill up, and I hate those bags anyway. So this is not how I'm telling you to do a 2-stage. I'm just showing you that for my shop, which is a very small shop, and for what I need the dust collector to do, this is going to do it for me. The whole thing cost me, with the extra hose and things, about $200, I think, maybe $3. With the hose and the hose adapters, I have a new hose because the hose that came with the Harbor Freight machine is inflexible, and so I bought new hoses for it that are much more flexible and expandable. And I think that's it. It is very hot in my shop right now. Have a good day, be well, leave your comments, subscribe. There was supposed to be a lot more on the channel by now, but I'm just clumsy. So that's it for now. Be well.